The corporate world thrived on unspoken power plays and silent hierarchies, where influence wasn't flaunted, it was understood. BCE systems operated under the same rules. Status wasn't just about job titles, it was about access. Late-night workers knew the truth. Proximity to the executive offices determined significance. Beyond the glass walls and polished floors, loyalty, discretion, and quiet obedience were the real currency of success. For some, this suffocated them. For others, it was opportunity. The rhythmic click of heels echoed through the nearly empty office, where a few employees still wrapped up their work. She moved with purpose, nodding in brief acknowledgement to familiar faces. Most had no real understanding of her role, except for the CEO's personal assistant, a redhead who had once been in her position. She understood everything, but had chosen to stay, content with the perks of a salary too high to walk away from. Occasionally, she still handled morning duties when the blonde wasn't available. Lisa arrived at BCE Systems before 4 p.m. daily, preparing for her evening responsibilities. Her office, tucked behind the CEO's, was separate from the rest. After setting her belongings down, she freshened up in the restroom, reapplying her makeup with precision. At exactly 4:30 p.m., never early, never late, she made the call. A soft click signaled the door between their offices unlocking. The gap left in the doorway confirmed his presence. Entering, she found him at his desk, seemingly occupied but fully aware of her arrival. She remained still for 5 minutes, as expected, before dropping to her knees. Officially, Lisa was a project performance expert and a top-level accountant. In reality, her duties went beyond financial reports. She alone was trusted with certain tasks. The CEO meticulously reviewed her assignments for the evening, covering matters known only to them. When business was done, he led her to his private quarters, a space designed for comfort and control. A king-sized bed, an expansive closet, a personal bathroom. The setting was masculine, stark, void of any signs that women lingered beyond their usefulness. She assisted him as she always did, carefully hanging his suit, placing the rest of his clothing neatly on the chair. Their arrangement had shifted over time. She had learned to speak only when required, trained through repeated correction. Early on, when she was still intimate with me, her boss had been careful not to leave marks. But as her marriage faded, so did his restraint. Now there was no need for caution, not in ways that would leave visible proof. He often inquired about her home life, subtle reminders of the risks she took. Though he once insisted she maintain appearances, he had since accepted her emotional detachment, provided it didn't interfere with his needs. Any disruption would not be tolerated. Her submission, her whispered gratitude, became ritual. She had been shaped into exactly what he wanted: obedient, devoted, dependent. Meanwhile, miles away, I was blindsided by a call from an unfamiliar number. The woman on the other end knew details she shouldn't. Lisa's workplace, my job, even personal aspects of our life. I was wary but curious enough to agree to a meeting. I spotted the vehicle easily, a white Land Rover with Illinois plates parked just where she'd described. Following her to a more discreet location, I pulled into an upscale shopping center and parked a few spaces away. The woman behind the wheel, dressed casually in jeans, boots, and a white sweater, had an air of authority. Jet black hair framed striking features, her lips painted red, dark sunglasses masking her eyes. She appeared to be in her late 30s, though with women it was always hard to tell. Once inside, the doors locked, and the car eased out of the lot. She introduced herself as Katie Weiss, a name that struck immediate recognition. Her husband was Eric Weiss, CEO of BCE Systems, Lisa's boss. As I processed that connection, she began speaking about Lisa, our history, how we met. The story took me back years. Lisa and I had crossed paths in a nightclub, back when life was simple. She was impossible to ignore. Long legs, blonde hair, a tight white dress that commanded attention. Every man in the room watched her, some with admiration, others with envy. But for me, it wasn't just her body, it was her face, undeniably beautiful. She noticed me watching, exchanged glances, and before I knew it, we were inseparable. Our relationship moved fast. Within weeks, we were together. Within months, engaged. She had wanted a Texas wedding, but financial setbacks forced us to scale down. Instead, we married in San Diego, an intimate ceremony attended by close family. A brief honeymoon in Vancouver led to a new life in Ohio, where my career took off. Lisa quickly secured an accounting position, and we thrived. Those early years were golden. We built a life filled with social gatherings, career success, and an intimacy that never faded. We took pride in staying fit, being ambitious, turning heads when we entered a room. Closeness was never an issue. From the beginning, it was passionate, wild, uninhibited. We didn't concern ourselves with conventional romance. Love, for us, was found in raw chemistry, in pushing boundaries and indulging each other without hesitation. Then came Kyle. 5 years into our marriage, our son was born. 2 years later, Amber followed. Parenthood shifted our priorities but didn't weaken our bond. We embraced the chaos of raising 2 kids while keeping our careers on track. We found balance, even as responsibilities mounted. A trusted nanny allowed us to reclaim date nights to keep our connection alive. We had everything: a solid marriage, a growing family, financial stability. Then Amber got sick. Unlike Kyle, who was always talkative, Amber was quiet, reserved. Doctors told us delayed speech was often linked to higher intelligence, a theory that seemed reasonable given Lisa's and my own IQs. But just before her 3rd birthday, Amber had a seizure. Nothing prepares you for a moment like that. At first, doctors suspected epilepsy, but an MRI revealed something far worse: a tumor. The only chance of saving her was surgery, but the cost was astronomical. We had decent salaries, but this wasn't something we could afford outright. Lisa managed our finances, but I already knew the answer. We would have to risk everything. One night she sat me down, tension etched across her face. She reminded me of our insurance switch, how my company's policy had better coverage. But even then, the surgery was classified as experimental, meaning most of it wouldn't be covered. Then she mentioned BCE Systems Charity Fund. 20,000 given, another 20,000 as an advance we'd have to repay. A relief, but nowhere near enough. Determined to contribute more, Lisa revealed she had been offered a promotion, a second shift position. The pay increase meant we could keep up with expenses and avoid outside help for Amber's recovery. But it also meant sacrificing what little time we had together. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. We had to do it, or at least that's what I believed at the time. Amber underwent surgery shortly after Lisa transitioned into her new role. My employer gave me 2 weeks off, but BCE only allowed Lisa 2 days. We adjusted. While our son Kyle spent most of his days in kindergarten, I became Amber's primary caregiver at night, managing her recovery while Lisa worked late. At first, everything seemed to improve, until the doctors announced she needed another surgery, doubling our financial burden. Lisa somehow secured another loan from BCE, and while I was grateful, something between us shifted. She grew distant, overwhelmed by stress and responsibility. Whenever I asked how she was holding up, frustration flared. She felt she carried the financial burden alone, while I struggled to prove otherwise. Lisa started working later and later, returning home past midnight, sometimes closer to dawn. When I questioned it, she insisted she was taking on extra responsibilities for another promotion. Our marriage, once so passionate, had become strained to the breaking point. Months passed, and our intimacy faded entirely. What had once been a relationship filled with excitement and connection turned into a mechanical existence. 2 people sharing a home, but barely acknowledging each other. I buried myself in taking care of the kids, while Lisa devoted herself to work. Even when Amber finally began to recover, her speech returning with therapy and her health stabilizing, our marriage remained unchanged. Then came an unexpected turn. One morning at work, my colleague Jeff greeted me with excitement. Our office lottery pool had won, $100 million split among 10 of us. Shock washed over me as I realized what this meant. We could finally pay off Amber's medical debts. As the news settled in, my coworkers celebrated. Sheila, a woman who had long been a source of quiet temptation, leaned against my desk, her body language unmistakable. She knew my marriage was crumbling, and she wasn't shy about making her interest known. With newfound confidence, she hinted that I had options now, that I didn't have to remain in a marriage where I was ignored. Temptation lingered, but I resisted. Even with everything that had happened, I still had a family to think about. I had decisions to make, ones that would shape the rest of my life. I drove home still in disbelief. That morning, I had been drowning in debt. Now, I was a millionaire. After taxes, my share of the office lottery pool would be just over $6 million, enough to wipe out our financial troubles and still have plenty left. The house was quiet when I arrived. The kids were at school, and Lisa's car was in the driveway. She had come in late again. I had waited up until 1 a.m., but exhaustion won, and I fell asleep on the couch. By the time I left to take the kids to school, she was already in the shower. As I stepped inside, I heard the water running upstairs. I called out, and she responded from the bathroom, asking for a few minutes. She sounded indifferent. I made coffee and waited, catching a glimpse of her silhouette behind the frosted shower glass. It had been years since I'd last touched my wife, and longer than I could remember since we had been intimate. She noticed me watching as she reached for her robe inside the shower before stepping out. She wrapped a towel around her hair and avoided my gaze. The silence between us was thick, charged with unspoken resentment. In the kitchen, she poured herself coffee without a word. I mentioned how we used to pour each other's cups, and she dismissed it. A lot had changed. I didn't hold back. She had pulled away from me, spent no time with me, and refused any intimacy. I asked her outright, what had happened to us? Her response was sharp. Amber's illness had changed everything. The medical bills had drained us, and she had worked herself to exhaustion to keep us afloat. I knew all of this, but I also knew she had shut me out completely. Then I told her the news. We had won the lottery. We could pay off everything. I'd expected relief, joy, maybe even a moment of closeness. Instead, she looked panicked. She abruptly stood up, muttering that she couldn't quit her job, that she had obligations. When I insisted that we could pay everything off in days, she bolted upstairs and locked the bedroom door. An hour later, she came down dressed for the gym, carrying a business suit in a garment bag. She tried to rush past me, but I blocked her path. It was obvious, her late nights weren't just about work. I didn't ask for an explanation. I told her my decision. I was filing for legal separation. We could stay in the same house for now, but in 3 months, if nothing changed, it would become a divorce. Since she was barely home, I would seek custody of the kids and the house for them. She could find an apartment closer to work, wherever she really spent her time. That hit a nerve. She crossed her arms, but the tension in her jaw betrayed her. She insisted she didn't want a divorce. I reminded her that this wasn't the marriage I wanted either, but it was reality. The first priority was clearing our debts, including the loan she had taken from BCE. I told her to get the loan balance from HR, or my lawyers would request it directly. Her response was hesitant. She claimed she couldn't promise they'd give her the statement. I asked what kind of company wouldn't want its money back. She sighed and agreed, but in the way that said she hated every word of it. I let her leave. As soon as she was gone, I called a friend who had gone through a brutal divorce. He gave me the name of his attorney. To my surprise, I got an appointment that same day. Before the legal process began, I moved into the guest room. My lawyer advised a legal separation as the safest step before divorce, urging me to remain calm, avoid conflicts, and never give Lisa any reason to use anything against me. The lottery winnings were placed in a separate account under my lawyer's supervision. 2 days later, Lisa sent me the BCE loan statement, not directly, but through her attorney. The remaining balance? Just $5,000, a drop in the ocean compared to what we now had. But instead of relief, Lisa reacted with panic. That was when I realized something was seriously wrong. I started running the numbers. Amber's surgeries had cost around $100,000. And with BCE's charity covering $20,000, we had been left with an $80,000 debt. Even with interest, the total repayment should have been around $120,000 over 5 years. Yet Lisa had earned an additional $600,000 in that time, money that never showed up in our accounts. I combed through tax records but needed an expert. My lawyer brought in an accountant, and the results were clear. Half of Lisa's earnings had disappeared. When my attorney confronted her legal team, the response was explosive. It was obvious Lisa had something to hide. The realization hit hard. This wasn't just about money. She had emotionally checked out of our marriage long before this moment. Whatever had happened over the last few years had pushed her down a path that no longer included me. With no way back, I focused on what mattered, our children. I had to ensure they were secure, even if their mother was barely present. Since she worked while they were home, I had essentially become their only parent. Accepting this, I made a few changes. I bought a Lexus. Lisa, in turn, got herself a black Mercedes SUV. I barely saw it. Between her schedule and mine, we were ghosts under the same roof. Despite my lawyer's pressure, Lisa's attorneys refused to disclose where the missing money had gone. It vanished as soon as taxes were paid, and I had been too trusting, letting her manage our finances. But back then, I had loved her. I had believed in her. That love was gone now. Our marriage had become a distant, hollow obligation. We paid off all outstanding debts, split the remaining assets 50-50ths, and finalized the legal separation. 3 months later, we still shared the house, but only in the most technical sense. Lisa wouldn't talk about divorce, but she made it clear she would fight for custody. My lawyer warned me to tread carefully. Without proof of neglect, she had as much right to the kids as I did. Even though I was free to date, I held back. Legally, I could, but practically, it was dangerous. If Lisa found out, she could manipulate the children, painting me as the one who had destroyed the marriage. Without evidence of her infidelity, I would become the villain. So I waited. Sheila wasn't happy, but she understood. We had occasional dinners, always arriving separately. Caution was necessary. Lisa had the resources to hire private investigators, not out of love or jealousy, but to gather leverage against me. With that in mind, I hired my own investigator to follow her. 2 weeks later, the report came in. Lisa's routine was mundane: work, shopping, brief school visits. No obvious red flags. Investigating BCE would require an inside source, which meant more time and money. Instead, I focused on something more pressing: DNA testing for my children. The results confirmed what I needed to know. They were mine. Then, Katie Sanchez Weiss entered the picture. She arrived at a high-end restaurant in her white Land Rover, and I followed her inside. She booked a private room, introducing herself formally as Miss Kathy Sanchez Weiss. The exclusivity of the place reminded me that I was now part of a different financial world, though it still didn't feel real. Sitting across from her, I barely glanced at the menu. My appetite was gone. Katie exhaled, picking up on my tension. She knew the feeling. Betrayal and disbelief had a way of stealing hunger. Then she confirmed it. My wife had been involved with her husband, Eric Weiss, since Amber's first surgery, but it hadn't started as a typical affair. She hesitated, searching for the right words before finally locking eyes with me. This was something more, something worse. And then she told me everything. Katie exuded authority, clearly used to getting her way. Annoyed but willing, she gestured for me to ask my question. "How sure are you that your information is accurate?" She didn't hesitate. She had spent over $50,000 this year alone uncovering the truth, and nearly $70,000 every year for the last 6. Then she played the recording. Lisa's voice trembled with desperation, begging for mercy. But Eric Wise, her boss, was unmoved. He wielded his power without hesitation, reminding her that people in positions like his had always used their influence to remind those beneath them where they belonged. He told her she had no real choices. Either she obeyed him or her daughter would suffer. No amount of money she could gather on her own would be enough. Even if she sold everything, she wouldn't afford the costs of surgery. And more than that, the doctor who could perform the operation was under his control. He could make the surgeon refuse. Lisa pleaded, but Eric reveled in her despair. He mocked her resistance, taunting her with how much he enjoyed corrupting a married woman. He wanted her not just as an affair, but as a possession, someone he could summon at will, even during work breaks, without any disruption to her job performance. Lisa caved. In tears, she agreed. She said the words he demanded to hear. "I will be yours." The recording ended. That conversation had taken place 5 years ago, but for me, it felt like it had just happened seconds ago. Katie shut off the audio, stating that the video evidence was far worse. This wasn't the place for it. She signaled for the bill, and I followed her outside in silence, still in shock. Sitting in her Land Rover, I finally found my voice. "Your husband is a monster," she gave a bitter laugh. "You haven't seen the rest." Back home, I tucked the kids into bed. They sensed my distress, but I reassured them. How could I tell them the truth? That their mother had spent the last 5 years betraying us all? That every late night, every weekend at work had been a lie? Alone in my office, I logged into the secure server where Katie had stored the evidence. "Dave, these are explicit," she had warned. "Even I struggled to watch, and I don't shock easily." The files weren't just damning, they documented everything. The folders were labeled by month, going back 5 years. I hesitated before opening the first folder. It contained 15 videos, all from her first month with him. The timestamps revealed the worst. Her first recorded encounter had happened right after the conversation I had just listened to. Another was dated the night before Amber's surgery. 2 more were from the day she returned to work, just days after our daughter had gone under the knife. I felt sick. The pattern was clear. At first, the frequency was staggering, nearly every work night, sometimes twice a night. As I scrolled through the months, I noticed a slight decrease in activity after the first 3, then a sharp increase by the 9th. That month, videos appeared on weekends for the first time. Some files even had names, men I didn't recognize. I forced myself to watch some of them. Most took place in Eric's office or in a private room attached to it. At first, Lisa hesitated, but every time she showed reluctance, he reminded her of her situation. She had no choice. And yet, as time passed, the resistance faded. What I saw wasn't just blackmail. It was something else entirely. She hadn't just complied, she had embraced it. To anyone else, these recordings might look like standard adult videos, but to me, they showed the woman I had loved, my wife, becoming someone unrecognizable. I had spent years in bed with her, Memorized every expression, every sound she made. There was no deception here. She had wanted it, and that was all I needed to know. In one of the earliest videos, Eric laid down the rules. She would wear skirts or dresses every day except during her period. He would verify those days. As soon as she arrived at work, she would remove her underwear. And most importantly, she had to stay married. I stared at the screen, disgusted, but there was no denying it. This wasn't just an affair. It was something much worse. The next video showed Lisa arriving the following day, already conditioned to Eric's control. Dressed in a short dress and heels, she was scolded for being late. Any excuses, even a major traffic accident, were dismissed. By the fifth recording, their interactions were effortless. Her resistance completely gone. It wasn't just that she had betrayed me for 5 years, denying me intimacy while indulging in her own desires. She had humiliated me, mocked me, and discarded me without hesitation. I skipped ahead, stopping at the day before Amber's second surgery. Eric took advantage of Lisa's vulnerability, using her stress against her. Watching it made me sick. The man had no mercy, even when her child was fighting for her life. For a moment, I pitied her, remembering who she had been before this. But the sympathy faded as I saw how much she had continued to enjoy it long after. Lisa had fully embraced her role. She entered his office with enthusiasm, addressing him formally, eager to please. The realization hit me. She had not only chosen this life, but had preferred it over our marriage. The closeness must have been so good, so fulfilling, that she cut me off entirely. In her mind, Eric was her man. I was just an afterthought. The recordings confirmed the worst. Lisa hadn't just betrayed me with Eric. There were others. She had been passed around to clients, business associates, and men with no connection to her company. The list of names was staggering. 58 men besides Eric. My wife had become a corporate escort, willingly or not. I shut the laptop, disgusted. What I had seen could be mistaken for just another adult film, but the truth was far worse. Lisa hadn't fought back, hadn't sought help. She had surrendered completely, as if our life together had never existed. Despite knowing the truth, I continued my routine. I got the kids ready for school, went to work, and coexisted with Lisa under the same roof. She returned home as if nothing had happened, sometimes freshly showered, other times carrying the unmistakable scent of another man. Katie, the only person who truly understood, listened when I told her what I'd seen. For the first time, she reached out, placing her hand over mine. The touch stirred something in me, a feeling long buried. She noticed and didn't pull away. The connection between us had been forged through pain. Both of us had been betrayed by the same people. In that moment, something shifted. We sought comfort in each other. That night, we had love. For the first time in years, I felt alive again. With Katie away on business, I didn't stop. The weight of my past lifted, and I embraced my freedom. At work, my confidence was obvious. My colleagues noticed the change, some amused, others irritated. Soon, I had a string of affairs: a coworker, a divorced mom from my kids' school, a gym receptionist, a college waitress. Lisa had wasted 5 years on another man. I refused to waste another second. At first, I overindulged, making up for lost time, fueled by a mix of ego and pent-up frustration. The conquest felt good, but the emptiness afterward was undeniable. I enjoyed the physical release, but intimacy was something I still craved. What unsettled me more was realizing that, despite everything, I still missed Lisa. That feeling quickly turned to disgust when I heard a recording of her and Eric discussing their meetings in my house. If she had brought him into our home, onto our bed, this would be a crucial piece of evidence, not just for the inevitable confrontation, but for the upcoming custody battle. I checked the date. It was recent, just a month ago. She had planned everything meticulously, ensuring our schedules never overlapped. They reveled in the idea of their affair happening under my roof. The power dynamic between them had shifted over the years. She no longer called him sir. They were now equals in their twisted relationship. Whatever dominance had once defined them had evolved into something deeper. I needed proof. I ordered high-tech surveillance cameras, installing them throughout the house, focusing especially on the bedroom. The system was motion-activated, linked to my phone, and capable of capturing everything in real time. The investment was worth every penny. When Wednesday arrived, I could barely focus during my morning meeting. As soon as it ended, I checked the live feed. There they were, together on my bed. The betrayal no longer shocked me. 5 years of deception had numbed the pain, but now I had undeniable proof. Lisa had brought another man into the home where our children lived. This wasn't just about infidelity. It was about complete disregard for our family. That night, I waited for her return. As she entered the house, I closed my laptop and locked it. Her heels clicked against the floor as she passed my office. She glanced inside, saw me watching, and turned away. Without acknowledging me, she announced she was going to shower and head to bed. I followed her upstairs. She left the bedroom door slightly open, just enough for me to see her beginning to undress. Her phone and purse sat on the dresser. When she spotted me, she stopped immediately, demanding I leave her things alone. Her voice was low, wary, not wanting to wake the kids. I ignored her, took her phone, and turned it off. She froze, glancing toward the bathroom door as if considering an escape. I dared her to try. She did, unsuccessfully. I caught her easily, pulling her back and tossing her onto the bed. Panic flickered in her eyes. She pleaded with me to stop, but I wasn't here for violence. I was here for answers. I ordered her to take off the dress. She resisted, but I made it clear she had no choice. Hesitantly, she unbuttoned it and let it slide off her shoulders. As she continued, I noticed the bruises, dark marks on her chest and neck. The reality was inescapable. No underwear, no shame. And the proof of her infidelity was written all over her body. She gasped when she realized I had seen them. I didn't need confirmation. I knew everything. Lisa barely managed a weak protest before I cut her off. I laid it all out, how I had every detail, every recording, every name, how she had spent the last 5 years with Eric in a parade of other men, reducing our marriage to nothing. At first, she tried to justify it. Eric had forced her. It had been about paying off the loans. I reminded her that I knew how it started. I had heard that first conversation, watched as he manipulated her, and for a brief moment, I had pitied her. But what followed? That had been her choice. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Lisa had the money to pay off our debts and free herself from Eric, yet she had chosen not to. Instead, she kept most of it hidden, continuing her long hours and cutting me off completely. It became clear she had made a choice, and it wasn't me. She didn't deny it. It hadn't taken much for her to surrender. One encounter, just 30 minutes, and she had become his. She claimed she had no choice, but the truth was different. She hadn't just given him her body. She had given him everything. He hadn't just conquered her physically, he had taken over her mind. When I mentioned the surveillance footage, the color drained from her face. Katie had documented everything. Every encounter, every transaction, every humiliation Lisa had endured, or, more accurately, embraced. The videos left no doubt. Lisa hadn't been forced. She had surrendered willingly. Worse, she had taken pleasure in it. The recordings exposed her complete transformation from reluctant participant to eager partner, from victim to willing conspirator in my humiliation. I could have asked why. I could have demanded an explanation, but it wouldn't have mattered. The truth was, she had done this by choice, and nothing could change that. The evidence was irrefutable. I had detailed records of every event she had missed with the kids, proof of her meetings with Eric, and videos of her bringing him into our home. A judge wouldn't look kindly on that. I made it clear. I would fight for custody. She could see the kids regularly, but Eric would never be near them. Tears welled in her eyes as she grasped the reality of her situation. Whether she felt genuine remorse or was simply angry at being caught didn't matter anymore. The following days were tense. I caught her watching me, something she rarely did before. One evening, she finally spoke, asking if I wanted to know why. I didn't expect honesty, but I let her talk. She admitted that, at first, she had been disgusted by Eric's proposition. It was selfish, cruel, and everything she believed men shouldn't be. But when she realized she had no way out, something changed. She convinced herself that Eric had saved us, giving her a way to pay for Amber's surgery, even though the cost was unthinkable. He had backed her into a corner, making it clear that resistance was futile. Then, she started rationalizing it. Lisa claimed that women always had choices in marriage. She had believed she could have everything, a perfect family, a successful career, control over her life. But when Amber got sick, her illusions shattered. She faced failure for the first time, and instead of fighting, she let Eric take away her choices. And that's when she said it. She believed he had freed her. He had taken away her stress, her decisions, even the burden of morality. There were no consequences, no guilt, only submission. Hearing those words made me realize something. Lisa hadn't just betrayed me. She had lost herself entirely. Lisa spoke with a disturbing certainty, as if she had reached some ultimate truth. Her words were detached, calculated. She no longer saw herself as a victim, but as someone who had embraced her circumstances. She claimed Eric had simply opened the door to a new reality, one that had freed her from illusions about choice and morality. She insisted he had never broken a promise. When Amber's first surgery failed, he had found another doctor, covered all additional costs, and even relieved her of any financial burden. Over time, their arrangement had evolved. He wasn't just her captor. She had become just as attached to him as he was to her. She saw our deal as simple. She had given herself to Eric in exchange for Amber's life. According to her, I had been powerless, unable to do what was necessary. Eric had the influence, the wealth, and the willingness to act, while I had only been a helpless bystander. Lisa claimed I would have done anything to save our daughter, stolen, liquidated, sacrificed myself, but none of those options had been available to me. The only choice had been hers. And when it came down to it, she had picked the only viable path. There had been no hesitation, no second thoughts. She showed no remorse, no guilt. She made it clear. If given the choice again, she would do it all over. Then she admitted what I had long suspected. Her submission to Eric hadn't started with closeness. It had begun the moment she realized she couldn't refuse him. She had begged him to reconsider, only to realize that there was no way out. Her obedience had been inevitable. What shocked me most was how casually she spoke about it. She acknowledged that, given different circumstances, Amber could have died, and we would have had another child. That cold statement hit me harder than anything else. She had hidden the truth from me, not out of guilt, but to protect herself. Most of her affairs took place in Eric's office, in a hidden room where no one would suspect. She had made sure I never found out, until I did. She justified everything by insisting that I had been inadequate, incapable of saving our daughter, while Eric had delivered results. His power, wealth, and control had become an aphrodisiac for her. The attraction had been more than just physical. It had been psychological. She admitted the closeness had been incredible. She had loved it. Then, she turned the question on me. She asked how I had felt after sleeping with someone else for the first time while still technically married. She dismissed my reasoning, pointing out that separation didn't erase the reality of what I had done. But the difference was obvious. I hadn't chosen infidelity for years. I hadn't abandoned my family, living a double life. Lisa, however, had made peace with her actions long ago. She revealed that by the time she had told me about her promotion, she had already belonged to Eric. She had tried to maintain the illusion of a marriage, but it had been an act. The moment Amber needed a second surgery, her first thought hadn't been to turn to me for support. It had been to Eric. He had been the one she trusted, the one she believed had all the answers. I had spent 5 years raising our children while she lived another life. Now she was simply explaining it to me, as if she were recounting a past job she once had. There was no love in her voice, no real regret. She had made her choice, and in the process, she had destroyed everything we once had. I had already accepted that Lisa had been lost to me long ago, but hearing the details of her justification made it all the more unbearable. She admitted she had always trusted me to care for our children, knowing I would be there while she was away. But the way she framed it, placing me in the role of caretaker while she belonged to another man, stung in ways I hadn't anticipated. She spoke about her relationship with Eric with unsettling detachment, breaking it down into stages. The third phase, she explained, began when she understood why Eric had chosen not to humiliate me. He had considered making me watch, forcing me to accept the terms as he laid them out to her. Security would have ensured my compliance. In his mind, I was just another obstacle to be managed. Ultimately, he decided against it, not out of kindness, but because he believed I would have done exactly what Lisa had, chosen our daughter's life over my own dignity. He assumed that had I been given the choice, I would have allowed him to take my wife if it meant saving Amber. Hearing this was almost worse than the affair itself. The idea that Eric had calculated the extent of my powerlessness, that he had dismissed my role as a husband entirely, made my stomach turn. Lisa knew it too. She admitted Eric had wanted her to stay married, encouraging her to maintain intimacy with me so our family life remained undisturbed. But she couldn't do it. After giving herself to him, she found it impossible to return to me. I excused myself, locking myself in the bathroom. The weight of it all finally broke me, and I cried. Not just for myself, but for the life I had thought we had, for the years I had spent raising our children while Lisa had already moved on. Would I have allowed Eric to take her in front of me if it meant saving our daughter? Even considering it made me sick. Not just the act itself, but the thought of what it would have done to me, how it would have destroyed me completely. By the time I pulled myself together, Lisa had finished her shower. I forced myself to keep listening. Checking on Kyle, I found him sleeping peacefully. He had always understood that I favored Amber, though I had never wanted him to feel less loved. I reassured him whenever I could, making sure he knew he mattered just as much. Then, I walked to my daughter's room. Lisa was already there, standing by Amber's bed, watching her sleep. She looked like a stranger, someone I had once known but had long since lost. Had we married too young? Had she always been capable of this, and I had simply failed to see it? Had she betrayed me before Eric, and I had been too blind to notice? These were questions every betrayed spouse asks, but they no longer mattered. Looking at her standing there, I understood. She had made her choice, and I no longer judged her for what she had done that first day. She had been placed in an impossible position with no options left. Our parents didn't have the money. My sister couldn't help. Refusing Eric would have meant our daughter's death. But everything after that had been her choice. After Lisa's divorce, we had more than enough money, but no amount of wealth could repair what Eric and Lisa had done to our marriage. Standing next to her by Amber's bed, I crossed my arms, keeping my distance. Our sleeping daughter had no idea what had been sacrificed to keep her alive. Lisa adjusted the blanket, and I walked out, heading to the kitchen for water. She followed shortly after, sitting across from me. I handed her my bottle and grabbed another. Before I could speak, she raised her hand, wanting to finish her story. She got straight to the point. Why she had stopped having closeness with me. She claimed it wasn't just about being with Eric, but about not wanting to come home and give me the leftovers. The idea made me sick. I cut her off, telling her I didn't care about her excuses or her need for closure. Before I won the lottery, I had foolishly believed we might find a way forward, but the moment I saw her reaction to my win, I knew we were over. Watching the videos was just confirmation. If I ever needed to remind myself why, I could rewatch them, though I never would. She suggested staying together for the kids, proposing a post-nuptial agreement where we could live under the same roof but have separate lives. I shot it down immediately. I wanted nothing to do with her. She had found her new life. It was time for me to have mine. Lisa tried again, suggesting we pretend for the kids. I refused. Eventually, they would figure it out. She even proposed sharing a bed again. The thought was revolting. She had spent years giving herself to Eric and his associates, and now she wanted to crawl back into my space? Absolutely not. I reminded her that if Eric thought he could drag this out in court, he had underestimated his wife. Katie had already locked down the best legal representation before she even contacted me. Lisa scoffed at the idea that Katie would go this far for me. She tried to downplay it, mentioning Katie's move back to Chicago, implying I was just a temporary amusement to her. I didn't care. Katie had done more for me in a few weeks than Lisa had in years, and unlike Lisa, she wasn't lying to me. Standing up, I told Lisa she could call Eric and give him a report. I was done for the night. Once in my room, I texted Katie. Downstairs in my office, I logged into the server and accessed her latest update. When the images loaded, I chuckled. Then I laughed. Picking up my phone, I called her. She answered immediately. "Remind me never to get on your bad side," I joked. Unlike my ex, Katie was anything but stupid. She told me she had officially moved back, handling BCE issues personally. We planned to meet in the morning, giving her time to rest after her trip. As we ended the call, she laughed, and I realized something unexpected. For the first time in years, I was looking forward to tomorrow. At 9:55 a.m., I arrived at the mansion and pressed the gate buzzer. Before I could introduce myself, the gate slid open, signaling that someone had already been expecting me. As I drove in, I noticed a concealed gatehouse, almost invisible beneath layers of thick foliage. A security guard acknowledged me with a brief wave, directing me down a winding road toward the estate. The sheer scale of the property made my lottery winnings feel insignificant. The mansion resembled an old European castle, complete with stone towers and grand archways. Instead of a drawbridge and moat, it had modern, polished wooden doors with intricate stained glass, as expensive looking as the car I had just parked. This wasn't even Katie's primary home, just one of many. She had estates in multiple states, a yacht in the Mediterranean, a penthouse in New York, and a private jet. It was clear that wealth and power weren't things she had simply acquired. They were ingrained in her identity. Despite knowing all this, I still struggled to understand why she had taken an interest in me. At first, our connection had been based on shared betrayal. Our spouses had been secretly involved for years. Perhaps I had assumed she sought revenge by sleeping with the man married to the woman who had wrecked her marriage. But even after that, she had returned, and I found myself feeling something deeper than just physical attraction. Since she had left town, I had seen other women, but none of them held my interest for long. The thrill of forbidden encounters faded quickly. I had even canceled plans with Sheila and ignored her invitations. These women had been distractions, nothing more. But with Katie, it was different. I found myself looking forward to our conversations as much as our time in bed. As the mansion's front door opened, I expected a butler or staff member to greet me. Instead, Katie pulled me inside without a word, kissing me as if she had never left. There was an ease between us, as if no time had passed. Instead of leading me upstairs, she took me to the elevator. The descent felt longer than expected, at least 5 floors deep. She revealed that we were heading to a hidden underground level, a private space few knew about. The bunker, originally built in the 1950s during the Cold War, had been abandoned for decades before her father discovered and restored it. Unlike the fallout shelters I had imagined, this one was lavish and well-preserved, designed for discretion and security. She guided me toward a concealed metal door behind thick curtains. Unlocking it, she pushed the heavy doors open and gestured for me to step inside. What I saw next left me frozen in place. In the center of the dimly lit room sat Eric Wise, without clothes, gagged, and strapped to a wheelchair. His eyes widened in panic the moment he recognized me. He thrashed against his restraints, but there was no escape. Katie's smirk barely concealed her satisfaction. She instructed me to help move him, and without hesitation, I pushed the wheelchair forward, rolling him into the master bedroom. His muffled protests were ignored. Positioning him at the end of the bed, I leaned in close enough for only him to hear. I reminded him that once Katie was done, I had my own scores to settle. Katie, unfazed by the scene, explained that the previous owner of the estate had a fascination with extreme bondage. The room had been filled with restraints and devices, all now stored away. But the mechanisms still functioned perfectly, as evidenced by the chair Eric was currently bound to. By the time I had undressed, Katie had done the same. The air in the room was thick with unspoken tension. Her intentions were clear. This was revenge, not just hers, ours. She turned to face her husband, an icy finality in her expression. He had controlled and humiliated others for years, but now, he was the one who was powerless. She had taken back control, and for the first time, he knew it. Eric struggled against his restraints, attempting to speak, but his eyes revealed more than words ever could. It was clear he finally understood the situation. Even a fool would have grasped what was happening by now. Katie, exuding a calm, ruthless confidence, made it clear that there were no cameras in this space. Unlike the office where he had once recorded his conquests, she dismissed any notions he might have had about seeking revenge, assuring him that she had the resources to ensure he would never pose a threat to her, to me, or to my family. She had known of his infidelities for years. In their social circle, fidelity was often an illusion, but what he had done to Lisa had crossed every line. She questioned whether Lisa had been his first victim or if he had coerced other women into submission before. Either way, the reckoning had arrived. Eric had likely convinced himself that even if their marriage ended in divorce, he would still maintain control of BCE systems, given his majority shareholding. But Katie had news for him. His majority stake had come from her family's initial investment in the company. With their marriage dissolving, her half of his shares would revert to her. While she acknowledged she would take a financial hit in the asset division, the result was clear. He would no longer be the owner, nor the CEO. With his fate sealed, she shifted to why we were both in that bedroom, unclothed and unashamed. Unlike him, she didn't seduce vulnerable women or betray families in their own homes. She didn't blackmail desperate mothers into submission, and she certainly wouldn't threaten a child's life to get what she wanted. But since closeness had always been his obsession, she intended to use it to deliver the ultimate humiliation. He had taken what wasn't his, so now he would be forced to watch the man he had wronged take what had once belonged to him. The realization struck him hard. His expression twisted in horror as the truth of her revenge became clear. That night, Katie and I gave him a performance he would never forget. From his restrained position at the foot of the bed, he had no choice but to witness every moment. She took pleasure in ensuring he knew just how much better she found me, how she planned to continue with me, and how he was nothing compared to what I could offer. He seethed in helpless rage, but there was nothing he could do. He had always been a predator, feeding off power and control. Now, stripped of both, he was reduced to nothing. Something about his pathetic struggle made me want to see how much of his bravado remained. I decided to test it. Unlocking his restraints, I stood back and dared him to move. Katie, momentarily caught off guard, watched intently. Eric sat frozen, torn between his rage and the stark reality of his situation. I warned him against even thinking about retaliation, letting him know that if he tried, I would beat him into the ground. I had seen men like him before, cowards who thrived on abusing power but crumbled when confronted. He didn't run, he didn't fight, he just sat there, defeated. But my mind was elsewhere. While revenge was satisfying, my real concern was my children. My relationship with Elisa had been over for years, but I had held on for them. Now I realized they had already accepted what I had struggled to face. The following morning, as I prepared breakfast, Amber asked where her mother was this time. Kyle, without hesitation, answered that she was somewhere else, as usual. Then Amber mentioned a classmate whose mother had a boyfriend despite being married. Kyle, ever perceptive, asked if all mothers had boyfriends. Before I could reply, he looked at me and simply stated what had been obvious all along. Lisa had a boyfriend too. He laid out the facts with unsettling clarity. She had disappeared for years, prioritized work over family, and even after we won the lottery, she chose to continue working. Now she was barely in the country. There was nothing left to wonder about. They watched me, waiting for an answer. Instead, I asked if they would be okay seeing their mother only on weekends. Amber barely reacted, focused on her food, while Kyle nodded, saying it wouldn't be much different from now. That same week, I filed for divorce. Lisa signed the papers without argument. By the weekend, she moved into a nearby condo, close enough for the children to visit, but distant enough for me to finally be free of her. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. Life moved forward for me and the kids, though with a few adjustments. Lisa didn't contest the divorce or fight for custody. She walked away with half of the lottery winnings and her share of our assets, including our old house. I wasted no time putting it on the market. There was no way I could ever sleep in that bedroom again, knowing what had taken place there. Instead, I bought a new home just a few streets away, a fresh start for me and the kids. I saw Lisa occasionally at school events or activities, but we kept our distance, communicating only when necessary about the children. Over time, Kyle and Amber casually mentioned that their mother had started dating. I wasn't surprised. After 5 years of deception, fidelity was unlikely to be a priority for her. What did amuse me was the timing. It all became clear when I learned that Eric had been removed from BCE systems and had returned to Europe, relying on his family's wealth. His sister, the real power behind the business, had taken over. Eric, no longer in control, had nothing but time to chase after other women. Lisa had asked to join him in Europe, but apparently he had lost interest. When she arrived to visit, his apartment had already been vacated. That was it. Lisa moved on. So did I. Some might wonder why I let her go so easily, why I didn't go out of my way to ruin her. The answer was simple. Despite everything in her own twisted way, she had sacrificed herself to save our daughter. Whatever else she did, that fact remained. As for Katie, now going by her maiden name, Kathy Sanchez, our relationship evolved in an unexpected but natural way. We never discussed exclusivity or long-term commitment, yet she gradually became a part of my life. She moved in without fanfare, simply integrating into my daily routine with the kids. Despite all her wealth, her high-profile connections, and the luxurious life she had known, she chose to be with us. I never asked her to stay. It just happened. One night, after returning from a weekend trip to Montreal on her private jet, she dropped me off at my house with a casual goodbye kiss. An hour later, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, Katie was standing on the porch with 2 suitcases. Behind her, one of her security guards stood by a parked van. She asked if she could stay for a few days. That was 2 years ago. Our relationship didn't follow traditional expectations, but we were happy. She had spent her entire life surrounded by luxury, yet had never experienced the closeness of family. Raised by nannies, sent to elite boarding schools, and constantly overshadowed by her parents' business dealings, she had grown up without the warmth and attention that so many take for granted. The stereotype of Latino families being deeply family-oriented didn't apply to hers. At 40, she finally found what had been missing: belonging. And I, after everything I had been through, found something I had never expected: peace. We weren't bound by marriage, yet we had built something real. something lasting. I knew it was different because no matter where we were, at the beach, a game, on a plane, or just watching TV, Katie would naturally wrap her arm around me and rest her head on my shoulder. It was effortless, instinctive, like she'd found her place. They say when you find happiness, you should hold on to it. That's exactly what we did. A year ago, we ran into Eric in Paris. He was having lunch at a cafe with a woman, tall, dark-skinned, her blonde hair obviously dyed. He avoided looking at me, but as we walked past his table, Katie leaned in just enough for him to hear her casual greeting. The look on his face was priceless. A week later, while we were in Rome, the news broke. Eric's BMW 8 Series convertible had been found abandoned on a remote road near Strasbourg. Rumors swirled that the woman he had been photographed with was the wife of a powerful Arab prince, one who didn't take betrayal lightly. Karma had taken care of the rest.